Cancel culture is still pretty prominent today. To be honest with you, I myself thought that this was just going to be a fad that was going to quickly come and then leave. However, we still have tons of people today that are not willing and are fearful of sharing their opinions for fear that somebody that just does not agree with them will try to cancel them, will try to shut them up for good. Unfortunately, this type of mentality has also infiltrated the Christian community, where we have tons of Christians today trying to cancel people that they simply just don't agree with. My question to all of this is, what happened to loving your enemy? You know, growing up, I was a fan, and still am a fan, of an anime called Dragon Ball Z. And in Dragon Ball Z, I was reminded of a time where the main character Goku has mercy and shows love for his enemy Vegeta. So what happens is that the Saiyans decide to attack Earth, and Goku and his friends are the defenders of the Earth, so they go and confront them. Now this leads to a crazy battle where a ton of Goku's friends die in the process. Ultimately, like any good story, you have the main hero fighting the main villain in an ultimate showdown. And that's exactly what we get. We get new techniques like the Kaioken or the Spirit Bomb, and it's an amazing battle that ultimately leads to Goku winning the fight. Now, after Goku wins the fight with the help of his friends, we cut to a scene where Krillin is about to finish Vegeta. Now, in this scene, we hear that Goku is calling out to Krillin not to finish Vegeta off, instead to have mercy. And like Krillin, we are all shocked and pissed off that Goku is asking for this. We don't understand why this is. Now, there is a similar scene in the Bible where Jesus is making a similar calling. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 43, we see the following. You have heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. And we can safely assume that the minute that Jesus said this, there was an uproar. People thinking that this man was crazy. It's not natural for you to love your enemy, and even worse, to pray for them, right? So Jesus continues his argument and tells them, doesn't God allow the sun to rise and set on the unjust? So what more should we do? So what he's saying is that God has mercy on unjust people. So if God has mercy, who are we to not have mercy and to not have love for those that we consider our enemies or people that we don't like? Krillin is shocked, and he is in disbelief of Goku's want to have mercy on somebody who literally caused the death of basically all of his friends. Krillin questions him, and Goku responds with the following. He tells him, Krillin, if we do this now, how are we better than he is? How are we better than he is? Jesus also, in the following verses, says something similar. In verse 47, we see that Jesus says this. If you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even the pagans do that. So Jesus' argument here is a similar one of Goku, which is, if you don't have love for your enemies, you are no better than they are. You are the same as they are because you are treating them the same way that they are treating you. So what Jesus is doing here is calling Christians to a higher standard. He's saying, normally our nature is to hate those that hate us, to hate those that cause us harm. But instead, since we have received the love of God, we should also share that love with people that we consider our enemies. We should be sharing the gospel, and ultimately, like Jesus says, we should be praying for those that persecute us. Even though, obviously, it's not the easiest thing to do. In Romans chapter 5, verse 10, Paul reveals to us that we were also once God's enemies. And even though we were his enemies, He showed love towards us by sending his only son to earth to die a terrible death and die for the sins of the earth, providing a new way for us to renew our relationship with the Father. So I think that one of the ways that we can get through this natural desire to hate our enemies is to remember that while we were the enemies of God, he still loved us. How much more should we do? The last point that Goku makes is that he is hoping that one day Vegeta will come back and be their friend. And he uses Piccolo as an example, who was at one time one of Goku's greatest enemies. And yet in this battle, he gave his life for his son. And for those that are familiar with the anime, we know that Vegeta not only becomes a friend of Goku, but he also protects the earth right along with him. In the Bible, we also see a similar example in Paul. Paul was one of the greatest persecutors of Christians at that time. Yet God reveals himself to him and converts Paul into one of the greatest advocates of the gospel in that time. Not only that, but God uses Paul to write most of the New Testament that we have today, making him one of the greatest allies that Christians have had. So next time that we're feeling the urge to cancel somebody, next time that we're feeling the urge to treat somebody in a bad way because we disagree with them, let's remind ourselves and let's remember that we ourselves were once enemies of God, and yet he still loved us. And at the same time, we don't know if these people that we don't necessarily like today will become an ally of ours tomorrow. And hopefully with this in the forefront of our mind, we will be able to love our enemies like Jesus calls us to do. In this video, we talked a lot about love and loving your enemy. If you enjoyed this video, you're also going to like this other video where we talk about 2 different love stories, so check it out.